exit interviews, those types of things, the HR report.
I'm sorry, but I knew you read it down.
Why did they come?
And then professional development, Lenny's gonna bring to you what we've done on half days,
Oh, yeah, that's right.
you know, an update on that, since that was new to our calendar.
Right.
We'll have policy review, and then we want to bring to you, if it's okay, SRO curriculum updates. They've had some updates in their programs that we haven't done that in a while. Okay? And then I would like to bring to you all our over-the-counter drug policy and have Mr. Bradshaw,
Explain it.
explain it on, and what we can do and can't do. And then if we need to make a change, so I'd like to bring that and give you the update. Okay?
Okay?
Which I believe even includes things like suntan lotion.
Mr. Mullins, do you want to say
So
something?
was it the song for the kids who blow the trumpet, whatever it is, trombone?
You're gonna address the pickup procedures policy too at school?
Oh, yes, I have that one too for policy review.
Oh, yes, please do.
Custodian, yeah, pick up.
Parental consent.
Emergency card policy.
Okay.
Okay.
Exactly.
Okay, yes. Is that good to
Although,
go?
actually, we don't have a policy on that, do we?
No, that's
And
what-
I'm thinking that maybe we should,
I agree.
On what?
on the pickup.
Emergency, we dealt with a lot.
Are we talking about,
Of the
Parents.
custodian.
are we talking about who can or the way they're supposed to?
Both.
Okay.
And we don't have a policy, and Wes has received some somewhere. Several different policies from other districts, and we'd like to bring those and start talking about what
We're spending way too much time, staff time,
Yes.
trying to
Oh,
solve
it's
these
crazy.
issues.
It's-
I had phone call after phone call after phone call. Thank you for addressing that.
Last week, it must have just been custodial apparently.
Well, it was also,
National custodial.
it was also phone number.
We do need a policy. but,
We do.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
So Linda, will you email
I think
those
just say we
ladies?
don't need a policy.
But we do.
Well, here's my,
We don't have a policy, we have a procedure. And people will tell parents, this is our policy. It's not our policy, it's a procedure. Only the board can make policy.
okay, so here's my concerns, why I was thinking maybe we wouldn't want to have a policy, but we leave that up to legal. Is because we're now having to negotiate people's visitation, divorce actions, custody issues, my boyfriend, my second wife, my first wife, my ex-wife, my next-door neighbor, and all this. And they say, well, we'll look at your policy, and you're violating your own policy, and all this.
We don't currently have a policy, we have procedures that we follow. But I will tell you, there's a lot of gray areas in there that we're asking and expecting staff to make judgment calls, and that's what's getting us in conflict. Because one person's judgment call is different than another's.
Thank you.
Well,
And
What
it may,
we need to
and it may not be so specific with
Right.
each piece, but it may say that, because one thing that we try to hold to is that if I register my kids, I own that card. And that way I've got the right to add, take off, and those types of things, and
But
we're
that's
issued
what's
loans.
being challenged.
Right, and so we just need to have a discussion so we know what we're doing, and you all help us direct us where we want to go.
All right.
Okay,
Thank you.
all right.
Okay, so Ms. Lindy, I've asked, I think, Mr. Blocker before about it, but on the records, how many years we keep and stuff. And I know that the ESE records are very, very important records to keep for a child, but you know, it's maybe advancing at a slower pace, a little bit older when he gets out of school. And I'm wondering if we should not have a policy that extends the length of time.
Do we keep records forever?
Yes, beyond.
Don't we
The
keep
state
records
statute
forever?
requires.
No, what is it, that
No,
5
we-
years?
But now we've scanned,
Well,
we've
we
got
do
ours
scan-
digital right now.
And the attic forever.
Well, we follow the record retention GS4 manual that addresses all the records we have, and that's what we go by. The ones we're scanning are the ones we have to essentially keep forever.
There are some.
Which are my,
Yeah, student transcripts, personnel records.
my report card, my mother's report card.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah,
I can look that up for you right now.
thank you.
Oh, it's all.
But
scanned
there
in.
are
Yes,
others,
it's all
like,
scanned.
like testing and that sort of thing, we do not keep those.
We're not obligated to keep
I
it
know
after
we're
so
not.
many years, and we destroy it.
I know that, and that's what I question, should we not review that in policy?
That's certainly y'all's prerogative that you can have a discussion with Mr. Bradshaw. I know he's always told us to follow, I think it's the GS4 policy on our
It's the
manual.
least amount, though, and I think that we need to extend it beyond that. And I didn't even know this, I even, I was told that attorneys don't have to keep records, beyond 7 years. And that shocked me,
Well,
because I
that's-
was thought that,
The only thing that dictates that is, water department requires you to keep those records, and you can't go past every 5 years or 7 years, it's a statute of limitation on malpractice. Well, then you put a record, you wanna go to your doctor's office and they just
Yeah.
cleaned out their files, and they don't have your records.
I want records like these things sit
They'll
down
keep the
for a
records.
long
If
time.
they don't scan
We have
it,
them
they're
forever.
out of there.
Yeah, especially if you're not a patient you don't go to that doctor for a couple
Go
of years,
first.
next time you go back, they're
Oh,
gone.
I know that happens, not personally doesn't happen,
Right.
but it does happen to some people, they're doing minimum, and I think minimum's good enough.
The problem is the cost of
Yeah.
maintaining those, whether it becomes
scanning.
physical or even digital, there's a cost involved.
And retrieving them.
And the retrieving, and that's what I was just gonna say, and again, it's probably a Wes comment too, but there's usually a liability, or you are taking on a liability by when you're wanting to keep care and
You are.
control of those records past that time.
If you have them, you're responsible for them.
Right. So that's why I think a lot of times we're usually advised not to keep them, but it's a Wes question.
The Cume folders, as a parent, I grab my son's Cume folders.
Oh man, I wish I had mine.
Well, it's.
Not my son's, mine.
I would love it. Here's your high school degree and here's your Cume folder. It would be just so much fun for kids to reflect. Reflection's such a valuable piece of learning, and to be able to see what their writing looked like when they were in 4th grade, when we start those green folders.
And even our Cume folders have gone,
I like the green folders.
Oh, I
Are our Cume folders digital now?
I know you
I
did.
don't know the
I'm just
answer.
kidding, it hasn't. I was like, oh, it's so fun to read that.
And then for someone told me, Lou, that wasn't true, and that was just a comment by an attorney, but they told me that, scanning did not make it a legal document. Paper, signature, legal. Scanned, no.
Yeah,
I
I
don't
don't-
know, that's what I
Yeah.
was,
Not
no,
anymore.
that's what I was told like last
There's
week
a
by an
thing called
attorney.
e-filing now,
Yeah.
that's a requirement, and let me tell you something, electronic signature is being done by secretaries. And if you think your lawyer's looking at your documents, they're not. They've been phased out of the whole process. The secretaries are running the world.
That's right.
That's
right.
Particularly the ones
It's
that
scary.
All right.
Medical records too, all that stuff's all being controlled by the front office now.
Are we ready to go to school board operational procedures?
Yes.
Mr. Richmond?
This is just our one last page.
Okay.
Reading of that sheet.
I've got some extras here, I think. I do.
Tell Lynn, were you gonna bring some extras on that one last page?
She did.
She did?
She gave them to me. I've lost them. Is this it right here?
No, that's the
That's-
school board goals.
That's what.
This is the one that says, school board members' roles and responsibilities.
Take one and pass it
No,
down.
that's not it.
I don't care. I've got it. Get it.
It's the one with the spaces? We don't have that one?
No.
Hold on,
She
I
has
have,
to.
I might have a few. I know I have at least one blank one, do I want to make copies?
No, you're good.
It should be the last page.
It is.
Is that it?
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you, Ms. Bertaroni.
So instead of that, why don't we talk about our, I don't have a copy of our Citrus County School Board goals.
Yeah, I
Did you
know.
pass
I
that
have,
out?
no, I have that here.
She has that too.
Thank
We
you.
were going to just go back and look at these and say, what we want to do next about
Oh, you
them.
do?
So I think, what we talked about last time is we would just review these and say, have we done them? Have we not done them? Or were they ongoing? Did they need to be refined? Do they need new goals? So Ginger, you want to just kind of lead us through this?
Yeah. As soon as I give Aaron a copy. Hold on.
I do have a copy?
I do. I just got to print out.
Here, here's the, oh, okay.
I've got extras down here.
Just walk up and let them.
They went, no way, we're not staying for that.
They did not care.
Did we get one of these?
We have those from last time.
Do we?
Yeah. If not, we'll do that in a minute. Let's do the details.
Okay.
Before she comes back. Oh, she's back.
Get all this straightened out. As school board members, we will develop guidelines and schedules to enhance our work as a group. Develop guidelines for school board meetings, workshops.
And work sessions. And that's exactly what we're doing on these papers.
Exactly.
So I would say.
We've done that.
Once we get that all agreed, that's done. I would say, what do you guys think?
Isn't this the same one?
I'm not sure about developing talking points, but I think we do that.
Where's that?
At the bottom check, the first check mark underneath it.
All right, what's the second one though? Meet to monitor and evaluate progress of goals and strategies.
We do that.
Well, but you know what, we haven't monitored the progress of our goals and our strategies or the
Oh,
districts.
okay.
So do you all think that?
Where, I'm sorry.
Just as-
Oh, there we go, got it, okay.
Have we done that?
Number 1, bullet 2.
We've been meeting the ones, I think, of like the state of the district, but that's not, but I think we were talking about ours,
Just
were
so
we
we
not?
need to, have we scheduled that, Linda Board Rummy, have we scheduled the school board
One
goal
minute,
setting?
please.
Sorry. On our calendar?
We used to do that in the January, February
Mm.
timeframe,
Yeah.
because if any new board members came on in
Right.
November,
They would-
then that gave us time, because we had the FSBA meeting in December,
Mhm.
first of that. So usually it was a January, February, so what is your preference?
February, put it down.
February.
February, right now, we're monitoring.
Oh, and it's already on there.
It's on February. Is it in February?
Yeah, we
Good.
got that.
I knew I liked February.
Now, let me ask this, do you want that like every 6 months, or once a year, every 6
Probably
months would
every
be
6
good?
months, we need to like review them, right? Don't we need to see where we're at?
Yeah.
Mhm.
How about if I put that in July, because usually our first date of the district starts in August.
Yeah, that's
Mhm.
good.
And that way it's by
Okay.
itself. Okay.
Thank you, Ms. Helen. All right, pursue a variety of strategies to support interaction between the school board and the community.
We haven't done that.
Well,
We kind of have.
Individually, we do it.
We do it individually, but we've not had a collective voice, and some of that came into that conversation about, okay, if we were going for a millage rate, if we were
Mhm.
going, for different things when we were trying to, as a board, move our goals and agendas. How do we do that? And are we talking the same conversation?
When we're looking at this, if we establish our goal, whatever goal it is, if we have 3 goals, 5 goals, whatever, we're looking at just trying to streamline it here, the goal at the top, these things fall under that. So
Right.
when it comes to are we meeting our goals, well, what are our goals? Well, we have them right here. Variety of strategies to support interactions between the school and better. So that's one goal that we have. What's our strategy for doing that? Then it comes into determining what it is that we want to have a common voice on. So it might be the Common Core Initiative, because that's definitely something the
That's a
community
great-
is interested in.
Mhm.
It could-
Whatever it'll eventually be.
Right.
No, I'm just-
Whatever the governor does.
Whatever it is.
Right, and so looking at what the community hot buttons are right now, that'll help guide us, and it'll have to probably be pretty fluid too, but that in itself is one of the goals, that we can monitor twice a year as needed.
And I know that there are people in the state of Florida that are upset with Common Core.
Well, there's a lot of missing.
I think
I know.
And the talking points need to be for us as well, so that when we're asked about speak to community organizations,
That's what I thought.
we're all sharing the same
Same
information.
page.
Yeah.
So this needs to be
And
both copies.
Right.
Well, and may I throw something in? I know it's,
Sure.
and Patrick, and between this PowerPoint today and Patrick's, the one that he did at the Nature Coast Recovery Committee,
Right.
we were going to bring that to you all also, just to show
Okay.
that when we go out, that's what we're gonna say. And then if that's what you all like, we'll give you copies, and when
Okay.
you go out, that's your PowerPoint too, and we're all on the same
I
page.
think it's real important that each of us have a copy.
Right,
Well,
right.
so-
And then, you know, we've talked about like that better use of the website. The question that I've always been asking myself is like, when we have a presentation like today, like Patrick's, you know, some districts archive that, and that's on there, so when we have conversations, we can say, you know, well, we got a presentation on that, you could go to the website and look at that PowerPoint presentation, or,
Can't we do that?
we can, but I also think needs to be, is that what we want to do? Because, I mean, you gotta remember, I'm the one that, I'll just throw it up there, and then somebody later says, really, that's what you wanted up there, Tom?
Well,
So
we could use, Thomas, why couldn't we get, and I know we, video it there, so can we cut, paste from that? Or maybe when there's a presentation like this.
That
we
tends
can
to look
go
at
to
us,
video.
so,
Yeah, when he's
so,
yelling at us, not just giving questions.
but like, you know, like the PowerPoint presentation that has those slides,
Yeah.
there's a lot of good information on those slides that we all sometimes know.
And why don't we just post those PowerPoints after you see
I
it?
think that
And if
becomes a
there's no
very,
tweaking on it, then we just post that right on.
I think that would make a lot of sense.
All right,
Okay,
cool.
all right.
Number 2, expect and support flexible, highly effective programs and initiatives that result in a 100% student completion rate. That's why I asked about those 4 students that Ms. Nobles.
Was it 47?
I don't
On
know.
that one, or, yeah.
There was 4 that we didn't know what happened to them, so I
Oh,
asked her.
right.
Yeah. Make decisions creatively and not necessarily to be in compliance.
Well,
I'm all
I
for
like
that.
You know, we were really angry about something. I guess it was all the high school graduation requirement. That was last year, and that was when we were completely and totally overwhelmed.
Is that why we wrote that down?
Well, and we were saying, you know, it's not okay to say we don't have enough money, we'll get by. It's not okay to say, yeah, we have these graduation standards, we'll work harder. You know, we needed to go and do something about it, and I think that we did. We've all been vocal, we've talked to our legislators. I think that we have had some positive results.
Oh, I mean,
And
there's
we
no
said
question.
enough is enough.
I mean,
We said that.
1076, a lot of that came out of conversations that we had with Patrick, that we brought back to legislators, that we worked in committees and conversations. And I think those things were heard. On the other hand, the part that, I have escaped.
Well, so that one, I don't know, at the time,
And I think some of that was that idea of like, for example, the standardized testing.
I think a lot
We
of
could
it is
speak
just-
out about those
Right.
things.
Right.
But like I've said before, you know, our teachers and administrators and even our superintendent has to kind of keep walking down that road.
Mhm.
We can be more verbal in our, you know, roles because we can kind of get away
And
with it.
creative
And creative.
and flexible.
well, I think the other thing is, and this is like what I said to Mr. Simon today, and what I've said to other people. Our role is not to be in compliance. Our role is to be the advocates for the community.
That's right.
That's who we represent, and for our kids.
And that's really,
And so if we have that responsibility to speak out in areas where we think maybe things are wrong or things aren't fair, things need to be changed. So I think that's where a lot of that is coming from,
Yeah.
that we don't have to say, oh yeah, we think it's great that everybody should take Algebra 2 and pass it to get out of high school. We don't have to say that. And that
I
when we
agree.
make decisions, you know, we need to.
And I've never said it.
Well, it's almost kind of like what we're talking today, is how do we get around that students not doing well in geometry now, what, let's, you know, let's be creative rather than say, oh, well, you know, let's put them back in the 8th grade.
And I love the Penn Foster thing we're doing. I
Oh,
love
that's
it.
another one, yes.
well, I was gonna say Penn Foster, E2020, those were creative, out of the box thinking.
Yes, they are.
That was, and I will tell you, there are districts that I talk to and they'll say,
They're crying.
what are you doing?
Yeah.
They are
How'd you do that?
crying.
Who let you do that? Yeah, you can do that? And I'm like, hey, until they stop us, we're doing it.
So I think that's kind of a general philosophy.
Don't say
more than
until
a
they stop us.
strategy,
That's
but
true, so.
the next couple though are ones that are bothering me very much.
All right, what are they?
Well, this next one, explore flexible schedules at high school to address or increase graduation standards. Should be grades, not standards.
Well, you know, that came
Graduation
out of
rates?
the whole question of the block scheduling and the flex scheduling and all of that.
Okay, so here's a problem, though, and I told Mrs. Himmel this, it's happened in a couple of different schools. And it's the institutional knowledge, or it's the back planning, the planning that took place this year. Next year, whoever was in charge of that planning has moved on to a different school or a different job, and with them
Yeah.
goes the knowledge and the planning. So we're not doing a good job in letting the ideas and the strategies stay with the school. It's staying with the person. And
You need to write a recipe
we
book.
even had a school that didn't even have any SAEC notes. They didn't know who the members were. They had no bylaws, nothing. So somewhere along the line, there's some things being missed as far as
Because they didn't have their guide.
continuation, right?
Or their girl,
Or the continuation of, we talked about algebra 1A, 1B at some schools, some other schools were doing algebra as a 45-minute all-year-long block. And so we talked about looking into using that as a strategy at all three high schools, and then the strategists aren't there. So I'm not sure what to do about it. I'm not sure how we ensure the continuity of ideas and strategies.
because that also then became a budgeting decision.
Well, it was
Which then-
actually a good budgeting decision.
Oh, no, I'm just saying that's what I ended up, I think, though, really became, first it was about what was best for students.
Right.
Then it became, what can we afford, while still trying to maintain what was best with students.
I definitely see your point, I definitely share your concern and your question, how can we address that? It could be addressed within the school improvement plan meetings that we have, if we develop a check sheet that's clear of the items that we want to review. Not necessarily play the accreditation role,
Right.
but take the school improvement plan to just a different level where we're looking at best practices within the school system. And if that is one of those things you would like to see, it should be on a checklist that the principals get before we come on property.
Here's part of the issue though. The school improvement plans now, the school improvement plan development has been moved off into the summer. And then the summer is when the new people have come on, the old people have left. The parents of the fifth graders are gone, parents of the seniors are gone. Now we have, no parents, or some parents, or different teachers, or new principals, assistant. Maybe it's the documentation and solidification of ideas and thoughts and inquiries as to doing things differently. Somehow or another needs to stay in someone's head so they can make sure that people are
School historian.
following up on it almost from a district level. And, that may just be something that one kind of personality takes on as their role, and another person doesn't think about it. You know what I'm saying? It doesn't occur
But
to
do we
them. I
even
don't want
know
to tell
what
you your
it is
business.
in regards to that issue? Do we know for sure what the best schedule is?
No, but the interesting thing was, there was I mentioned this at the high school advisory council meeting, they had never heard of it. This was something that was discussed at the district level. And the math teacher said immediately, oh, the math teachers will love it. So, instinctively the math teachers know that, especially for struggling student, a student who takes algebra 1 all year long is going to be more successful than a student who takes it for term 1 and then takes the test term 2. Or takes it, I guess they're taking it at the end of the term, but, and studying what they're doing in middle school. I mean, there's a lot of different things that happen, and we assume that the school-based decision-making has a lot of continuity to it. But as we know, when the leadership changes, so does the marching orders.
And then,
You know what I'm saying?
Yep.
the issue
So-
though that we've had too with that is you then have sometimes that contractual issue with instructional staff where they're like, I want that hour and 45-minute planning. And for example, one of the things that I don't think we know what's gonna happen now is, well, we've got next semester. This semester they have low class loads. Next semester though, in order for them to have maintained their hour and 45 minutes at the high school level, their class loads are gonna go up to 30 plus students. that's not where we have been as a district. But that was a choice they wanted to take on. Well, I think sometimes that sounded good at the time. I'm very curious to see where this all pans out
In March?
in March.
Ooh, buddy.
And
Well, it
so
should
that,
happen-
that's.
That
the-
should happen in January, except that it's just historically, high schools lose some of their enrollment come January. So
Maybe.
they may not see as big of a difference as they thought they were.
And for students' sake, I hope that's the case.
And I'll go back to a comment Pat made about 45-minute all-year math. You know, sometimes it gets to be a schedule. It's not impossible.
No, but it's
But
a
you know,
challenge.
but it's worth a conversation.
Yeah, but
Among a lot
I
of
was just
people.
using that as an
Right, but
example.
that's a good conversation.
Because there was some other things that came up the last couple of weeks too that I was starting to hear, and I said, well, last year, I remember the conversation was over here, and now, what happened to that conversation?
And Pat, you're saying we're doing exactly what we say about the state adopting this program, that program, that
Right.
program. And the word that keeps coming up over and over is continuity.
Continuity,
Yes,
yes.
we need to see that continuity is maintained.
And let me just add something, 'cause Pat and I had this conversation
Yeah.
the other day, just to.
It's kind of just an awareness thing, you know, it's kind of just
Yeah.
one of those things that you don't,
Well, Mr. Mullins started this year, he meets once a month with all high school principals, and then all middle school principals, and then all elementary principals as a group. Because we know even at the high school level, you know, as bad as I hate to say it, people aren't knocking down the doors to go to be principals of high schools, and you all know that. Every district in the state's and every so
Word of the
it's-
state,
It's not
high
just
school
us.
principal.
Right, so, you know, that's one thing, and all they do is they focus on a topic, it may be math, it may be the algebra piece, it may be, you know, the language arts department, so they keep a focus each month as they go through that, because we recognize that we don't have the historical knowledge at all of our three high schools that we've had in the
Right.
past, because Kelly Tyler was there for what, 20 years?
Yeah.
And now Citrus has had a lot of turnover too at the same time, so we know that.
Kelly Tyler was at LaCanto for 20 years.
I think 18 years.
Kelly Tyler, as the principal of LaCanto High School?
Yeah, for a long time.
He was there a long time.
Not as principal the whole
No,
time.
not
He
as
was there as
principal,
teacher.
Oh,
But
okay.
he was principal
I was
for,
thinking-
he came here for a couple years and he went back up. to
Right, he was
principal
at the
for-
district office for a while,
Yeah.
yeah.
He was.
So, I'm not, you know, I think, well, like, for instance, when we had our State of the Union, presentation last time, when we had all that data, I said, okay, so what are we doing about it? Maybe what are we doing about it needs to be a more full discussion, and then develop, strategies and goals that are documented, and then that we go back and review.
Red light, green
Red
light.
light, green light,
yellow
yellow
light.
light.
And then also this goes to the school sides too, because many people besides are left out of the information. They do not know this information. You might have a pocket here and a pocket there, but overall, they do not. So we need to have it, they need it.
Maybe I guess maybe what I'm saying is that our district goals maybe are a little elusive, because we don't have our strategic planning process like we used to have in place, where all different levels of people would get together and they would come up like a school improvement plan with a district improvement plan, and we would document it and we would review those goals and our progress, once a year and sometimes twice a year, and we kind of got away from that. But it became more departmentalized, but maybe we need more of that structure back in our life.
And I think this kind of gives us that structure when it comes to determining goals. This gives us the parameters that we can work through. And then this can help guide us as far as what we want to focus on. And again, looking back at the flexible schedules, I think as a board, considering that we're looking at policies
Oops.
and monitoring progress, it comes down to making sure we have a climate as a board that allows staff to explore and feel comfortable coming to us with some out-of-the-box strategies that
Right.
we can look at as something that we can improve.
This, and I go just because we're saying that again, and not that you weren't saying that by the way, but like the schedule, I think we had that group, we didn't, but the superintendent pulled together a group of kind of strategy of school-based people when it came to like the schedule. That's what came out of then the recommendation that we have now, which is basically the higher loads in the second semester. And so the struggle of that is, you know, we hope that everyone makes the decision based on always only what's best for kids, but then it becomes, and it's just human nature, well, but, you know, I need that planning, because if I don't do it then, I can't go home at this hour and do, and it becomes, unfortunately, I mean, I've had people say, if I don't have that, then I can't go to the restroom, and I can't go do this, and I can't do that, and, I mean, I'm literally, and then you wonder, okay.
I live it.
Yeah, I know you know, that's why I
I'm
said.
I'm saying it goes back to the trickle-down effect as far as responsibilities, looking at our parameters and trying to establish goals based on the line, you know, it all comes back to this tool.
And that's what I say, and we approved a budget that permitted that.
But at the same time, it has to do with expectations, and that's how we got in the conversation we had in the school board goals to begin with. When we first started with this, and we said, 100% graduation rate, someone said, you can't do that, and we said, well, you tell me which kid we're gonna say is okay that
Right.
doesn't graduate. So we set those expectations high. We knew we weren't gonna get 100%, but we started getting in the 90s very quickly, right? So I think that that's kind of maybe where we need to get back to, because we do have data. The data is going to be changing in the next couple of years rapidly. And we really need to address those strategies. For a school to say, we have a 60%, we have a goal for 60% of our kids to pass the test that allows them to graduate, to me, it's like, why would you set it at 60? Well, because right now, only 50% of people are passing. I mean, an increment of 10% is something to work for, but I think we should work for 100%. And that the sharing of ideas, I think, happens internally, and maybe we don't know about some of that stuff. But I always see our role as being, my husband calls it the 30,000 feet view. We're looking down at all the schools and all the administrators and all the principals and all the assistant principals. Instead of one principal has a good idea, they're not going to tell the other 10 principals what to do. They don't have that authority. Mrs. Himmel has that authority. But we all sort of have that global view.
Helicopter.
Could be a helicopter.
Well,
It's higher than a helicopter.
decides what. I mean, I think that goes back to the 100% graduation.
Right.
You all
Right,
said,
exactly.
that's what it is,
Right.
and then it was the superintendent's role to say, basically, make it
Do
happen.
Yeah.
Do it.
I mean, I think even with the schedule, one of the things I don't know that we did last year, because, and I think we've made some improvements, but I think I still agree, I don't know that we've done enough flexing of saying, should we have an expectation that all, let's say, standard algebra is done on 45 minutes year long? And so that we expect every, school to be offering.
Certainly
that.
at-risk students.
Or, and exactly.
Whatever.
Those are those, so what, and then the reality is, Ms. Hamill says, I can do it. And then we have to decide how much it's gonna cost us, and can we do that within that budget?
Exactly.
And I do think that's the fair back that comes to us. But I do think we aren't probably saying the what in that way.
Or instead of saying, our expectation is that all high school students 45 minutes algebra, maybe you put in there, it's your expectation that the district explores that flexibility, that our high schools go out, research other districts, find out.
And I think that's fine,
And bring
yeah,
the data back.
absolutely.
I mean, like Pat said, that data's gonna change.
Yeah.
Constantly.
And it needs to
Somebody's
change.
doing something different.
The needs are to change, from a board's perspective, I would really be reluctant to request that they have.
It must come up.
Well, yeah, it needs to, because they're the ones that are identifying the need, and they're the ones that can give us suggestions so that we can say, let's explore what this is.
And remember, like, we have some somewhat conflicting information, because we've got a school that's done it on 45 minutes, has almost the same results that the school that's done it on AD.
With end of course exams now, you're not losing the skill development from when the semester ends in December to when the testing used to be.
Right.
In
Right.
February, March, April, whenever they decided to have the testing day. So the system is being streamlined every single year, as easy as it looks from the outside. It is being polished from the inside. We just have a heck of a curveball thrown at us here with this testing schedule not coming until March.
You know, I started to come back and I thought, you know, what a difference this board is. You know, this board from a board maybe 12, 15 years ago, when had I walked through the door, the argument would have been about paint color, faces. That's what they are. And when I came 16 years ago, and I thought, I walked back in here and I know all of us are doing meat and potatoes. It's solid stuff that makes the school system, not some ethereal.
Well, what surprises me is when I talk to other school board members around the state, and they know so little about their own data, and they know so little about their own strategies, which really almost frightening. You know, say, what is it that you all do? And they do talk to people about our stuff. Yeah. But so, I don't know, maybe we just need to re-explore how the district does goals and strategies and how it gets communicated to the school level, regardless of who the leader of the day is. You know, I think maybe that's the lesson from all of this, is when the leader of the day leaves and takes all the ideas with them.
And in
the-
2.5
the
years,
schools are-
unfortunately.
Well, that's a good idea. Well, you know, they kind of figured that out last year, I have to tell you. And that happens, you know, you can't,
How many times does Mark Bruner get quoted in one fashion or
Yeah.
another? I mean, that's that.
He was
You know,
quoted today.
yeah, he was.
Because
You
that's
know,
that another one
And
of
that was
that.
a discussion that he and I had very many years ago, when we came up with the idea of the school improvement plan template. We designed that whole thing because we states that we haven't used their template, they thought they were smarter than us. But he said, you
But
know,
we
he
haven't.
this was back in the days of school waste management, that was the
Mhm.
idea of the day. He said, you know, I've always thought about, and at that time it was 10 elementary schools, so I guess it was before Central Ridge, of being 10 individual, you know, individual entities, and we all kind of share our ideas. He said, but you're talking about 10 spokes on one wagon wheel. I said, yeah. He said, I like it. And so that's where we came together. We started this school advisory council training for principals and for the chair, so that they would all understand looking at data, analyzing data, developing budgets, and giving tools on how to do that. And everybody started doing things in the same way, and all of a sudden our test scores started going up and up and up, because everyone's on the same page. And the good ideas floated to the town.
And it was easy for parents, was myself, who got on the tail end of some of that, to be able to see, oh, so that's where I fit into it. That's where the curriculum, and then you really felt like you were part of going out and selling that to the rest of the
Right.
parents and the rest of
And
that.
initially, when it first came about, it was at the school side. The first thought was, oh, yeah, we're gonna have
Another.
an advisory. And now, totally different. People go, oh, good, you know, and, this is a chance to get something done. This is
Well, the
a
interesting thing, the
chance.
staff, I think, now
Yeah,
has
the
the
staff has
buy-in.
gotten much more involved
Oh,
than they
yes,
ever have
much
before.
And it's now we've lost the other way.
Yeah, so I mean, maybe, and you know, Ms. Semple, maybe it's time to go back and have a district, strategic plan meeting like we've had.
I'm laughing.
I know, because
underneath.
you know where we've been with this.
I was laughing underneath because I met Lindy Ward there probably about a month ago.
Oh, okay.
And I said to Lindy, we need to do something about our strategic plan. We need to start bringing these things out because there's just, in the next few years, we have lots and lots of
There's
people
so much,
retiring.
yeah.
A lot of our knowledge is going out the door.
Right.
So, got a lot of great younger people coming in, but, you know, we just need to make sure we've got everything in place. And, so we pulled it up and like Dickie's name was on there and all that. They do update some of those things, but, and I just, so yes, that's gonna happen. So we'll get a plan for that and bring that back. But I wanted also about the school-based decision, because I know Dr. Bruner was loved that school-based decision. And I go to him, I said, well, what are they doing? He said, well, you know, we don't really want to tell them what to do and all that. But I will tell you, as a district perspective, not that we want to sit up and say, you do that, you do that. But when we're all pretty close to the same page, then it's not easier, but we can all stay more focused on where we're headed.
Right.
You know, because we don't remember the old total quality management and all the arrows.
TQM.
That's the only thing I remembered out of that thing, is that big arrow and everything going in the same direction, so.
And economically, we kind of have been forced to have to
Yes.
streamline
Yes.
so much of that.
and if you don't know where you're going, any road will take you there, right? So I think maybe because we have so many changes, maybe it's time to regroup. That's what I'm thinking.
Okay, so we don't need to do any more with this, is that what you're saying?
No, I'm saying at the district level, when we're talking about our school-based initiatives and all of that, maybe we need to get a more formalized process for a district strategic plan. I think we need to go back to that model, because it actually did work, and it did document the ideas and the strategies, and it gave everybody an expectation, you know, and,
Because I am worried that we're gonna just be down the road cutting off the two ends of the pot roast, as you've said, and that we're gonna say, well, but because that's the way we've always done it.
yeah.
And we don't have the person that says, well, that's because my pan was too small.
Well, let me tell you, they really don't make that comment to me anymore. I hate that
What
comment.
about the pants?
No, about, that's how we've always done it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You're right. Okay.
And then the idea was, the other end of the front was looking at those incoming kindergartners and wondering if their experiences and their readiness, how much of an impact did that have on their ability in kindergarten, second grade, first grade, third grade? And, you know, Amy Crowley, I think, has been pointed to as someone who's really good at gathering that kind of data. And again, you know, maybe that's just part of our strategic plan, is looking at school readiness. You know, what is it that we know about the kids who come to us, and then what happens to them in the first 3 years? Is there anything that we can do about that? You know, I've talked about reaching out more to our pre-K, what pre-K is more effective than others. You know, what do we do about some of those society issues that impact our students coming to school ready to learn?
And we trust our own dentists, we know people gathering, we know.
They evaluate those kids 4 times a year.
But if you read in the magazine, something, you know, one in seven people fall down steps 3 times a day, you know, crazy stuff. But you just don't want to go there. But we trust the information we get here, so we can make decisions, solid information.
That's why I had to ask Karen Jordan who in the world she was talking about.
For what?
She wasn't talking about our kids.
Oh, yeah.
That national thing, it scared me.
Well, it's also that people make the wrong conclusions about data. You can say whatever you want with data if you don't know the facts.
Absolutely.
So I think that's all inclusive in looking at who our students are, who our teachers are, what are our strategies, and if something's not working, what are we going to do differently? Okay. Okay, so we're going to go back to developing a district plan. Because it really isn't our work to do those things. Okay,
And now we're to number 3.
all right.
Maintain a high-performing instructional status within the current economic climate. I don't know what that means.
It means that how are we gonna do more with less? We're not gonna fire teachers, we're not gonna get rid of art and music.
We did that, we
Those
changed
kinds
the
of
rules again on
decisions.
it.
I know. So the first one is to explore the tax referendum process, and I think that's still an ongoing issue that we're gonna have to decide by probably March of 2014. So that's, you know, just kind of.
And I go back to that really has got to be, and that goes back to that other, you know, the bottom of number 1. That's gonna need to be a very unified, you know, discussion.
Social media.
Well, and I will tell you, the districts that were successful, and I point to Flagler County, who now has $60 million more over the next 10 years because they got a half-penny sales tax passed. They will tell you the reason they got it passed is because they hired, or they didn't, but they had their educational foundation fund basically a group that actually funded this initiative. And they, you know, had huge campaigns where with t-shirts and all the things that got funded through a PAC. You know, we can't do that, as we know. We have limitations within the law, but a PAC can do that. So, and they, and that was.
Who does that?
What?
That's what's his name?
Oh.
Our buddy.
No, please. Boss.
David Voss.
So,
I think too, we need to talk with the supervisor of election, who set up our ballot last time?
But that was, I don't know.
Some of it
That
felt
ballot was
statute,
so poorly,
because we come after all
all
of the amendments.
We
And
were-
I think that we don't
And
have
there
a
was a
choice.
big push to vote no on every amendment.
Right, and I
Yeah.
think,
People didn't separate us from
right,
them.
and I
They
think
did
there's,
not.
I thought there was legislation that was gonna limit the number of constitutional amendments that could be on the ballot. I don't know if
There was
that's right.
every
That may
time
have come
they
from me,
get
because I said we need to put an amendment on there, so no more than.
Well,
one
I think that
amendment.
was actually someone was trying to get that through.
and it can only be a school one.
Right.
It, in our favor.
And I think that we're actually working on this other one, the explore the minimum maximum elementary class size. I think that was the directive that we gave you, that, you know, just because you have 10 kids doesn't mean that, you know, or 3 teachers in one classroom, you've seen that, you know, to balance out the numbers. The staff will make multiple hits of reduction of, we kind of did away with some of that reduction of days, right?
Yes.
Supplement, we found out who they were. So, what is it? This was an interesting scenario, we were talking about reducing the number of extra days that some people work. Taking away supplements, and what was the other one? There was another one, there was going to be 3 categories, and some people were in all 3 categories. So they say, if you reduce my days of work by 10 or 20 days a year, you take away my supplement, do something else, I just lost like, you know, 10% of my $10,000 or something. And we didn't realize that there were people that had multiple categories, and we were all working on reducing funding, and they were all in the same category. Yeah. Okay, and then your sick leave annual payout procedures. That's a negotiated item, but we kind of talked about that a little bit. We haven't done anything about it.
I think, didn't mostly all 3 of those items that are negotiated, we asked them to talk about it, and I think that they said no.
And where are we going at 5 o'clock? Okay, filter all decisions through how this will affect students. That ought to go in every single thing we do.
I think that's just a
I think we're
pervasive
kinda
part
there.
of,
I think we are, but I just don't want to forget it.
You know what, I'm sitting here looking at this paper and I'm thinking, why do we have this written down, some of these items? I remember it was Tina Banks back. She was our facilitator.
Yes. Yes, from FSBA.
So it's non-specific, just
was that this one? I thought this was Carol.
A lot of these are platitudes.
No.
No,
Oh.
this one here. These are-
Oh, well, that's why it's this way.
Yeah, platitudes.
Yeah.
So they're not specific for the specific strategy.
Okay, we need to go to,
Before you do that, next steps with this.
Okay, so we probably need to be more specific, but if we do it at the district level and our goals are kind of to
Fine.
get everything together, that will meet our goal and we'll have more specifics instead of platitudes to work with. Does that
No
make sense?
platitudes.
So I'm still confused, so looking at this, this is November.
I like the way you put that.
So looking at this is November 2011, goals that you guys established. So what have we just done here? Have we evaluated the progress of meeting those goals that we
Yes.
established
I
last?
think
Yes.
we have. I
So
think-
then looking at next steps, is there anything on here that is valid, that needs to be carried forward for next steps in action?
Explore the tax referendum process.
Yeah, and then number 2, I think all of number 2 is what we're trying to say, do we need to go back and redevelop a district strategic plan?
And we want to develop talking points, so that we all say the same thing in number 1.
And then
Common
we-
core.
And then we probably need to talk about in February, what other goals do we see that we need, or
And
expectations
and
do we need to
hopefully by
set?
then, some of this, we have a direction, although,
Yeah, because our school board goals may be very much influenced by what's going on at the time.
Well, yeah, and decides what, as part of our duty,
Right.
comes from being out in the community. So that decides what comes from input from others that are on the front line.
Right.
So that's something that's hard for us to just come up with in a meeting like this. It's developed over time.
Well, maybe what we do is we develop some sort of survey tools, find out what are the essential issues and concerns or worries or desires of people in the community, or parents, or teachers, or kids.
and I have said before in the past, you know,
We
the
haven't done that in a long
SACs
time.
have to every year do a survey, and so often They ask the same silly
The question
questions.
is,
and
isn't your child really, really happy?
I know, I know.
You agree or
And
disagree?
if you agree with that, tell us how many reallys would you put in it?
I'm hesitant to encourage a survey simply because I've taken so many of them myself, and you have a tendency, I think the dialogue that we have with people out there as we move through the community is so valuable. And when it's one-on-one, those that want to share and that do share want their voice to come to this table. And I think it's important, and that's why staff is looking at developing a policy for registration and to keep those emergency forms current. And not necessarily get in the middle of someone's divorce or custody battles, but to ensure that our staff is supported with policy that's solid, that they can reflect on as they move through their day and try to accomplish the staff.
And that's true, but like at the same time, and the other side of that, and I'm not talking about the surveying, but I've been here long enough to already see, we've got Common Core. They have no clue what it is.
We have a lot.
They're against it, but they have no clue
Right,
what
they
it
don't
is.
know why.
They don't know what it is.
They are against, let's say, the fact that they think that we're taking the Constitution out of our classrooms. They have no clue
Well,
what
let's
the
do this.
decisions were made.
And
So that's why I say it feels sometimes by their thing, kids can't count.
Well, let's do this, because I think what you're saying is so valuable, because we have to have a common dialogue when we're out there with these big issues that are fracturing our community. So with that said, maybe like, looking at this list that's here, maybe we should just focus in on what we think is the most critical right now, instead of having a long list. It seems like trying to come up with a common voice out there in the community so that we can educate through the tools provided to us by the staff with Common Core and whatever.
And I
else
think
is
the one that I think we probably would all have said would have been probably Common Core up until now. The problem is we don't even know what to tell them. We have no
Well,
clue,
but what we
really.
can-
And even then, we still won't.
But what we can share is what we are doing as a district.
And Ms. Himmel's gonna get us each a copy of that, right, Ms. Himmel?
And I agree, I agree.
But I do understand.
But see, here's the thing, you talk to
Or
parents,
misperceptions.
it's very easy, or it's much easier when you talk to a parent to explain that piece.
Right.
It's very different and very difficult sometimes to other members of the public that may not even have a dog in the
Well,
fight.
and
And that's where it's sometimes challenging, because they're frankly the ones that sometimes vote and have that perception, and yet the reality is they don't really have a dog in the
Well, I
fight.
think what needs to happen, and some of the information that's being disseminated out there can be filtered through Patrick, and he can kind of do the fact-finding research, and it won't be tedious or laborious, because it's pretty easy to shoot a hole through some of the stuff that's being disseminated when you find out who the author is. And then behind the author comes the root cause of why that stuff's being pushed out there. So and this is the dialogue that's necessary. How do we address this issue, the misperceptions of what Common Core and the mission of Common Core really entails? So with that come in place right now, maybe we can move forward somehow to solve.
Well, do we believe that Common Core is the best way to go? I mean, are we in a compliance mode, trying to defend it, or are we just bystanders? I'm a bystander at this point. I'm not in
compliance mode. I'm in research mode. I'm in fact-finding mode. And everything that comes at me, I'm looking at it just as if I was teaching a classroom, weeding through the propaganda strategies. And what am I looking at now? Is it spin? Is it?
Well, and that's what's nice about Patrick, and maybe we need to bring that PowerPoint for Patrick, because Common Core is gonna be the big topic in the next few months, next couple months. And his PowerPoint, when we went through it, and put things in there wasn't one thing in there that we said, here's why we defend it.
Right.
It just talked about when it was
Right.
developed and those types of things. And I go back to what Alberto said, the superintendent, a couple weeks ago. He said, we shouldn't be having Common Core discussion. We didn't have next generation standards, conversations or anything. And that was the biggest change in standards than it is now. So at least if you had the PowerPoint or you wanted to discuss with people about what's going on, that might be a good thing.
And the trouble is Common Core, when it's said, we each hear something different.
Right.
Because I hear standards, I think I hear math and ELA standards when I hear Common Core. I don't know, but I sometimes think you hear assessments and implementations, and budgets and costs, and that's, I don't mean to speak for you.
No, I hear, but my words that I hate the worst, regimentation, standardization.
Well, that's true.
Lack of individuality.
And I
and
hear
creativity.
the school board members at the Florida School Board's thing in Pensacola, they're scared to death because of the upcoming election. They're scared that they're gonna get beat over Common Core.
Yeah.
So
But
yes,
when-
we don't have to be the frontline defenders of it.
Oh,
Here's what we have to do, and this, I just wrote down these 3 things, this is our job in developing our goals and doing our job, is identify the most critical issues in the district. We do that by looking at data, and we do that by listening to people's concerns. We set expectations, and then we address the concerns of the community and parents. It's really our job. You know, there's a million other things that we can do, but if we don't do those, we're not doing our job.
That's true.
Right. So I think when in February, when we do our goal setting, probably the first thing that we need to do is identify the most critical issues in this district. We probably need to go back and look at the data. We need to go back and look at our own experiences and observations as we make our school visits and talk to people. And then just say, okay, so what's our expectation about how this is going to be resolved?
And we know though, that time of the year, what's the reality is, aside from Common Core, is gonna be budget. I mean, just realistically, we know that's when we always are starting to get deep into that budget. And like November, we wanna do this, we wanna do this, and by February, we're going, we don't even have 2 dimes to rub together.
Right.
And so that goes, and I'm not saying that's not the case,
No.
Pat, I'm just saying the reality is,
Well,
we know by then we're also into budget.
right.
But that's still driving it. That's still where we have to
It's
prioritize.
a February workshop about the, revisit all the goals. Do you all want a facilitator at that time? What's your thought?
Yeah, we need a facility. I mean, you need to have somebody to.
I think so.
It's always, I don't
Why not
know.
Mary Curry?
Mary Curry would be good if she's around. Every time we call her, she's going
You
on
know, I'll give,
some
that
trips.
time was 2 weeks notice, this time will be 6 months notice.
That's fine. I think we need to have a template for how we're gonna go about it, so we don't end up with really
There's
nil.
It'll
no
be
event-
5 months.
Well, no
If
offense
you
to
call the
MSBA,
day.
but they all focus.
Well, should we start though,
Different thing
even a
on their
month
side.
ahead by, not this, but giving each of us as board members before we get to that meeting that we give to Mary or whoever the facilitator is, a reflection of what we see as, each of us sees as those things, those critical issues. And then you know, like we did with the, when we had our training, then we kind of, it lays that on the board as to, are we all thinking the same thing? We may get there and, rather than have to come up with it on the fly,
So what you're saying is that in January, we should all come to the table with our what's.
or maybe even whatever the list of those what's are, but I mean, with some, so that those are somewhat put out there.
All right. Do you think we're done for today?
Well, we have this last page to do, but since we don't have time, I'm gonna just collect it back unless you want to
Which
keep
page?
yours, so that you won't be responsible
There you go.
for
Here's
losing
mine
it.
back.
If you can keep it if you like,
I'll give you
I've got
and
mine.
we'll do this next time.
Linda's keeping it.
Okay.
Thank you.
We don't make Linda go around recompensation.
Absolutely not.
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah,
at our workshop.
and I made a list of those items.
The last page for the goals that we're gonna do.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, all right. We'll get together, we'll combine on this.
All right. If there's nothing else, we'll adjourn this workshop. See you guys at Whispering
Comments?
Pines.